Hello, I'm Ramie.
And this is Dakota.
And this is Leveling Duo, the podcast where two lifelong friends discuss video games that made us who we are today. Dakota, what are we talking about, man?
Well, today I figured I'd talk about my experience with the Dragon Quest series.
I have very little experience with it.
Well, for those that know, basically it's a classic jrpg title. One of the noteworthy things about the series is that the creator of Dragon Ball, Akira Toriyama, is also the main illustrator for the artwork for the Dragon Quest series, which it was originally known as Dragon Warrior in its first couple of releases.
That's about as much as I do know about it.
Which, I mean, again, like classic JRPG style, like you follow a fairly linear story, usually got some fairly eccentric characters. You fight typically in a turn-based style combat. You travel around, going through the story, generally with the classic formula of picking up allies around the way and adding them to your party, usually ones with integral abilities that allow you to progress.
Instead of power-up items, you get power-up people.
Usually most of your characters will have a class or classes that they can choose from, and as they level up, you can basically add skill point into those areas. Typically, even if you max out a character, a lot of times you're not going to get enough skill points to max out everything. So usually the best thing to do for the end game is that you do want to pick a specialty.
Something to make yourself much better in one particular...
Well, if you want to get access to those, like, end-tier abilities, you basically have no choice but to funnel the majority of your skill points into those skill trees. Which, my first experience was on PlayStation 2 with Dragon Quest VIII, Journey of the Cursed King.
So, you missed a few.
Up until that point, I wasn't really like a huge RPG gamer. I'd played Final Fantasy VII and beat it on the original PlayStation, and that was kind of like my first introduction to kind of like JRPGs. What really got me was the artwork, because still am a big Dragon Ball fan. So when I saw the artwork, I was like, well, hey, this is, it's pretty cool looking. I'll check this out and see what it was into. With this particular game, you follow its silent protagonist style game, where you and your party of allies journey towards the goal of defeating the wicked Dual Magus, the person responsible with cursing the kingdom of Trodain and its people that you and your party are partially from. Which, spoilers, you are traveling with the king and the princess of Trodain, which the curse transformed the king into a little toad gremlin creature, and the princess into a horse.
Oh no.
And she pulls the carriage.
Oh my goodness. Maybe all the king needs is a nice kiss.
Well, unfortunately, even after they go through their journey and they defeat Dual Magus, unfortunately that does not break the curse, and there's more adventuring that happens and takes place, which is also classic Dragon Quest formula. The original Big Bad is usually controlled or influenced by some other great Big Bad that is the true final boss of the game.
Is it someone you've usually met before, like foreshadowing could be done?
Possibly. A lot of times, though, it's usually like someone or some sort of entity that's very ancient and very powerful that you don't really gain access to information about till typically near end game, just because of what it is. Which in one of the newer ones, Dragon Quest XI, that I've played, essentially it's chronologically it's actually a prequel to the rest of the series from the way I understand it. Now I could be wrong, and sure. Like any of you listeners out there, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's a prequel to actually the very first chronological Dragon Warrior game, because this hero takes the title of a true luminary, and with that he also takes the name of the, hero. And as the legend goes, I think it's Dragon Warrior 3 is technically the chronologically first game in the series. It takes place before 1 and 2.
Mm-hmm.
Dragon Quest XI takes place before 3. Because 3, you're named after the ancient hero, who was supposed to be the very first luminary.
Okay, so it would have to be. Either that, or they just call you the new luminary for no apparent reason.
Which, in the game itself, there's an ancient luminary, too, for your timeline, and is very reminiscent of the character designs from, the first couple of the Dragon Warrior games. However, As far as like the lore goes, you're the hero that actually defends the world and defeats the evil at the very end and saves it in like a total sense, not just like a temporary sense. I'll put it this way. It's a lovely game, especially like if you're a person like me that enjoys the grind, likes the leveling, especially if you enjoy that style of artwork. The characters are really fun, the story's very well written, and you've got good hours of gameplay there.
I could see how it would be fun for some. I always fall off of them when I try them. I just can't make it click.
Well, if you want a hard mode, they have something in Dragon Quest XI called Dracovian mode. In this mode, basically, whenever you start a new game, and you can only do this when you start a new game, there's a list of restrictions that you can place on yourself for in-game. And with those restrictions in place, at any point in time you can remove the restrictions, but you can't add them back. So if you want like a true playthrough on true hardcore mode where you got everything on that turned on, that's going to be some rough stuff.
Yeah, and you could always feel lesser than the people who didn't have to turn them on.
Well, some of them are, you can't buy items from shops. So like you literally have to depend on like item drops and what you find. So when it comes to upgrading weapons and stuff, like you can't depend on shops. Some stuff increases enemies' health. Let's see. Actually, like, hold on a second. Like, we live in 2023.
You can Google it. The year of our Lord 2023.
Several options with the draconian restrictions, or draconian quests, as they're called. One is no shopping. You cannot buy any item whatsoever from any shop. Another is no armor. Can't equip anything to any of your characters. Another is reduced experience from easy fights. And enemies are too weak, they grant 0 experience. Another one is all enemies are super strong, meaning that they'll be just stronger than normal.
Yeah.
Another one is your characters will be randomly afflicted with something called shy pox.
What?
Basically what that means is that they'll be randomly afflicted with the status ailment that they're like shy or bashful, so that they'll randomly lose a turn.
Okay.
If you have super shy pox turned on, then it's like normal shy pox, but it's for the entire party.
This is harder than Dark Souls sounding.
Got 3 more.
Oh, good God.
Another one is townsfolk talk tripe. NPCs will sometimes say random things, so it can like mess with your ability to complete quests sometimes. Another is, which this one is kind of rough, which is actually one that I've played around with before, and it does give you a different meaning with the strategy of playing. Is your party gets wiped out when the protagonist perishes.
That makes perfect sense that it would happen in real life.
To where, like, if the main character dies, like, there's no resurrection spell for him or anything, like, it's game over.
Yeah.
Like, he has to be the last man standing, if anybody. And then the last option is no fleeing from battle. In a lot of, like, jrpgs, like, whenever you enter a fight, or, like, for those that have played Pokemon, you know, like, when you, like, encounter a random, you don't always have to sit there and battle, like you have the option to run away.
Polka dots.
Yeah. Well, basically in this, like in Dragon Quest, like you have the option to do that as well. Like you don't have to always sit there and fight just when you encounter a battle.
Yeah.
Unless it's like a story battle. Those you can't run away from if it's like a boss fight, which is also pretty classic for most games. But imagine if you were trying to play a game where you had every single one of these turned on. So that means you can't buy items, you can't equip armor, your experience is reduced all the way around, so your ability to level up is going to be like harder, and it's going to be harder the more you level up, because the stronger you get, the less experience you'll get. Enemies are going to be tougher all the way across the board. With super shy pox, your entire party will randomly lose a turn in battle. The NPCs will sometimes impede your ability to complete your quests. If the main character dies, you receive a game over automatically. And in every single battle you go into, no matter what it is, you have to fight because you can't flee.
Especially in a game where they just pop up out of the blue, random encounter kind of thing. I could see it being quite tedious, if nothing else.
Yeah. If you're someone that's like played the game a bunch and like you're looking for that extra grind or extra level of difficulty,
yeah,
you know, like it's there. But if you want to play it on an easier mode, just fully experience the game, I say go for it because, like I've said many times before, guys, The games are there for you to have fun, not to stress about. You want to make it harder, you enjoy the stress and the grind, that's what floats your boat.
That's
Good for you. Go for it.
it's not for me.
But there's no shame in wanting to just sit there and enjoy the game, for what it is.
I have very few games that involve that kind of grind that I want to play. I don't mean it as a slight. I love to watch people play JRPG sometimes.
Oh, I completely get it.
I like the artwork. I like the characters as well. It's the only reason I tried to play the game. I like the art and the characters, but I just cannot get certain parts of the gameplay out of my way.
I can understand that, which between the two that I've talked about today so far, 8 and 11, 8 is still my favorite over 11, which 11 is more seamless and has like quote-unquote better graphics.
Yeah.
8 hasn't aged quite as well, like it shows its age.
11 also, the newer version of it, or the revamped version, or whatever they call it, you could revamp your whole gameplay to look like an old, 16-bit, 18-bit kind of game.
Mm-hmm.
Am I wrong about that one?
Yeah, with 11, you have the option on the Switch version to where you can play the game in like old school 2D overworld 8-bit style.
Yeah. I didn't have the heart to even try that.
What do you mean? Like, it's fun. Don't get me wrong. But it does kind of like throw you for a loop if you're not used to the old style loop. Because, it completely changes everything to the old school 8-bit. Even the combat menu and screen, everything. Which is a nice change up if you're kind of tired of looking at the same thing. Go in 2D mode for a little bit. Trust me, it'll refresh your eyes.
Square Enix, am I wrong in the name of this?
Yeah.
Square Enix. They also made Octopath Traveler for the Switch and other consoles now. It's like on a few things.
Which Octopath is another decent RPG that I recommend you give a try if you haven't before.
That's the farthest I've ever gotten the JRPG. I liked Octopath Traveler. There's a sequel out, I believe.
Well, there is a multitude of JRPGs out there.
Find your preference and go for it.
Exactly. Have fun. But I do definitely recommend the Dragon Quest. And if you pick up one and you like it, you like the formula, check out the other ones.
There is at least 10 others to pick from.
And there has been plans for the newest installment, 12, to be released sometime, I believe, hopefully within the next year or two.
What fascinates me the most is its effect on the Japanese economy occasionally.
Yeah, I'm a big fan. I would buy props, memorabilia, and stuff like that if I had the money given the opportunity and stuff. Just because, I'm a fan of the franchise. Not a hardcore fanatic, though. You go over to Japan, however, and if there's its release day for the new game, you better be prepared. For those of you that know what Black Friday used to be, imagine that, but cranked up to a point that you cannot imagine.
Think of a society as
and
best you can.
And that is no disrespect against the Japanese people, because I understand it.
America has Call of Duty days.
Exactly. What we have as Call of Duty days is to them like Dragon Quest release days.
I'm almost sure everybody, or every kid at least, has had a game they've stayed up all night playing when they shouldn't have, or called into work because of it. Because Japan is a society based around their work ethic. That's what we hear about. Structure, yeah. It's their way of life. And they will call into work for this game.
And that is saying something.
I don't mean to sound prejudiced at all here. That is what we hear about the Japanese work life.
You have to understand that Adam's majority of his understanding and education on Japanese culture comes from a series he watched from James May.
The salary man.
Yes. So, if that is anything to go by, then...
Also the string of suicides that I hear about occasionally from overwork.
Yeah, something that you can probably hear eventually on one of our other podcasts on the channel. Yeah,
we'll discuss that at the end if you want to hear about it. But, I hear about a lot of the negative things that their work life leads to. And even it's in their anime. Well, some of them.
Well, the way I look at it is, man, regardless of, where you're at out there in the world, if you get overworked and you get unhappy to a point, bad things can happen. And it's something that I hate. Which is one of the reasons why I like video games. Because, to be completely honest, guys, and I know that you know what I mean, if shit is going down, sometimes, even if it's just for a little bit, playing a video game, even if it's something simple from Solitaire, or if you're playing Call of Duty, it helps get your mind off stuff. It helps you process some things. and helps make things just a little bit more alright and takes the edge off. And it's a hell of a lot healthier than some bullshit drugs out there.
Try the best to find a game to get into. If you have a phone, you can play a game.
For those that are of age, I'm not condoning anything, like you do you. Any of y'all would have to admit, video games are one of the safest alternatives to helping you pass the time, help stimulate your brain, and work through stuff.
It really does do that. And it'll keep you on your toes as well. It ain't like you're not doing any. There is mindless games out there, but most of them you have to put a little thought into.
Well, I've always been told that there's apparently been studies done that certain kinds of video games can help improve hand-eye coordination and reflexes and critical thinking, which I think that just depends on what kind of exercise you're doing per se.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly what part of the brain you're working when you're playing Grand Theft Auto. Again, no hating on Grand Theft Auto fans out there. Just example, and you know why I'm using that as an example too. I like strategy and I like story. That's why I like JRPGs.
Yes.
Usually, there's an anime-esque shonen kind of style story usually going on. And there's enough of the combat and collecting and everything else that goes on that kind of helps stimulate all the nice parts of my brain, which I just like RPGs in general, but JRPGs as far as Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, technically Pokemon, and the majority of Nintendo licensed products, that's been my main experience with the JRPG scene. A little bit of Persona 5, I think it was. Played a little bit on it, but I've not sat down and played it to completion or anything. That's one of those games that I feel like you really do need to be paying attention.
I don't like the fact that your days are done on a timer, pretty much.
Well, that's kind of the point of the gameplay style. They're all like that, from what I understand.
Yeah, that's what I've heard too, and so I never actually tried one.
Well, I mean, that's what I mean. With that kind of timer and your time management becomes a thing, which I mean, I like resource management as a feature in games.
Time, I guess, is a resource, but
exactly. Some games like that, there's either a formula that you can follow that allows you to do everything that you want to, or you can just kind of play it how you would. You can emulate yourself as a protagonist, or you can play a certain wave that you want to, being no, screw everybody.
Yeah.
I don't want a love interest. I don't want friends. All of you can go to hell. Whatever you want to do. Which I like games that kind of give you that ability to where actions have consequences in game.
Yeah.
Not necessarily every single one, which if there's a game out there like that, I'd like to hear about it. At least when it comes to Dragon Quest, there's only certain times that picking a certain option will have a different outcome than choosing the other. Most of the time, the only difference you might get from choosing one option versus the second one is a slight change in dialogue, which is cool, all in all. But I do like it when there's actual more repercussions for saying or acting within a certain manner.
It's more of the role-playing part is you building your character, not making his decisions.
Pretty much.
No, that's fine. Most games are like that. It's kind of hard to find some that isn't.
Well, how we talked about with Bethesda games, your Skyrim or the Fallout. The majority of the game is essentially, you build the character, you give them stats, and you go through the world, gain experience, level up, make your character stronger the way you want them to be stronger, and then go from there.
The majority of Bethesda's Fallout series has more decision-making in it than Skyrim or Oblivion. I don't know about the older ones, Morrowind, really, when it comes to that, but I know in Fallout, you can make some huge decisions.
See, now, I like when games have features like that. If you, make a decision that interferes with the politics or the economy in a game.
Yeah.
I feel there should be, some natural repercussions from that. Not just oh, that's just how things are now, officially, but, there's no, actual visible change.
Yeah. Well, in Fallout 3 and 4, but mostly 3 in New Vegas, there's visible change. The radio will talk about you in different ways. Even the outros of the games, they will read out the things you've done in life and tell your long-term consequences to you as a credits roll.
All y'all are going to think I'm boring as hell for saying this, but, I'm the kind of person, I want there to be, consequences to where, if you flood the game market with, 10,000 iron daggers
Oops.
in Skyrim,
I don't know how that happens.
Then I feel like, like the overall value of iron daggers should plummet.
They are in stacks. Take one with every foot to the door.
Yeah, like to where even if like something like that was a thing, to where like a shopkeep was like at that point, like if you bought anything from them, they're like, here's an iron dagger.
Or 12.
Kind of thing.
Yeah.
Just because like you flooded the market, so now like there's so many, like they're considered like useless now.
So you go to Dragon Quest for the art and the style of gameplay.
Yes.
Even more than the story, I would say.
Well, to an extent, like, I mean, I really like the combat and the way it's kind of like stylized with each character having their own specialty with their own type of unique abilities, which a lot of them usually have like some sort of like 2 or 3-way path that they can take as far as like what kind of style of combat they want to accomplish. And then they usually have like 1 or 2 different paths for their like unique trait and their affinity for magic, respectively. Mm-hmm. Because like some characters are just the way they're initially built, there's certain abilities that they just can't learn. Kind of like your classic like white mage, black mage, fighter, knight, stuff like that.
Yes.
Certain classes can gain certain abilities, but not all of them are created equal in the sense that they can all learn the same thing. Hence the reason why there's different classes. But like in Dragon Quest VIII, my preferred build was I like to have the hero would specialize in swords and boomerangs. Because swords for the ability to dual wield and the bonus to attack, but boomerangs was for like being able to take out large groups of enemies. Then I had a character, Yangus. He specialized in axes and fisticuffs.
I like the name.
And I would have him carry an item called Tambriel of Tension, which I'll explain that in a second. And then I would have Angelo, which was like the pretty boy in the game. I would have him focus on bows and swords, because if you maxed out his swords, he gained a really strong lightning ability. But I like bows better, so I usually went with bows. Plus I like the ultimate bow that you could get in the game, Odin's bow. And I was just a big fan of moves that allowed you to attack multiple enemies at once. Because for me, that was like my way of like helping with resource management as far as like MP and stuff like that goes. And then the last person on the squad was Jessica, and she was the mage of the group. Like, she would just like cast like really strong magic attack spells, or usually like cast some sort of like healing. Basically, like Angelo and Yangus, their main purposes were actually to use their respective items called the Tambriel of Tension, which in 8, your characters could do something called Psych Up, and basically that would increase like their level of tension, which would act kind of like a power multiplier on their ability for damage output or for resilience, like for withstanding damage. And this could increase in level. Once they hit 50 tension, they usually kind of like hit like a ceiling, and they couldn't like increase the tension anymore past that. But once your characters hit a certain overall level, all of a sudden they were able to like break past that threshold, and they would basically reach like tension 100, which was, remind you of like Kaioken from Dragon Ball. Because all of a sudden like you gained like this purple aura, and like your eye, like the character's eyes and stuff like that kind of got like a more of a slanted look to them. And the main character, spoilers for those that don't know, whenever he does his for the first time, you actually get like a little like transformation cutscene sequence. And his character kind of reminds you a little bit of Goku or Gohan. His hair is like covered with a bandana, his character model. Well, when he transforms into the super high tension, like the bandana disappears, and all of a sudden his hair spikes up. It's like he's went Super Saiyan, basically.
I've seen it happen, and I'm pretty sure in 11 you have something similar, but it's a special moves you can make, and attacks and all that with your companions. Am I wrong?
In 11, you have the ability to do kind of like more combo attacks with your party, versus in 8, it was more along the lines of like your synergy with what each individual was able to accomplish. Which, the synergy for different people's attacks and stuff was something that I did enjoy as far as 11 goes versus 8. But with 8, I guess just because it's kind of like a more, in a way, archaic way of how combat works with all the different characters, is one of the reasons why I like it so much. In 8, usually if I was fighting a boss, like this is how my first turn would start. I would tell everybody what to do, and I would tell the hero to psych up. Then I would have Yangus use Tamriel Attention, which would increase everyone's level by 1. And then Angelo would use his, which would also increase it by another 1. With the hero doing his own, that would increase his to a 3rd level. And then I would have Jessica cast Oomph on the main hero, so that it doubled his attack power for a couple of turns. And then I would essentially like either on the next turn go ahead and attack with the hero, or I would have him psych up and then have another round of Yangus and Angelo using the Tamriel Attention. So, because the point of them is to use those items pretty consistently every turn to be able to keep everyone's tensions pretty high so they can have like pretty decent damage output.
Yeah.
Because most of the time, the hero I considered my main damage dealer, and then everyone else was kind of like support characters for everybody else. Because another thing that Yangus had was I gave him a Sage's Stone, which when you use it as an item, it casts multi-heal on your party for 0 MP.
Well, that's pretty useful.
So, like, that was, like, my way of, like, being able to, like, maximize, like, my output to where, like, my MP is for offensive abilities. Like, if I need to, like, heal myself, I have other means. It's just, like, one strategy that you can do.
I have one healer and the rest are just damage dealers.
Well, that's usually how, like, a lot of the party systems usually end up working, unless you're, like, in, like, a Final Fantasy game where you end up with, like, 15 members, and you can only choose, like, 3 or 4 of them to make a party.
Uh-huh.
You know? A lot of times, like, usually with, like, the skill systems, like, everyone, to an extent, is kind of like a jack-of-all-trades, but they have, like, certain specialties that only they can go into, usually. Which, one specialty that I liked Yangus had was he was also the only character that could equip flails, and in the original version of the game, before they re-released it, there was only one, I think there was, like, one flail that you could get, and it was one that you had to get from Red, a character in the game. That was, I believe, supposed to be just kind of like subtly insinuated to be like an ex-love interest of Yangus. It's one of those situations you're like, she was with him, and you're like, nah. But then again, you know, if you're a Dragon Ball fan, like, you understand, like, it wouldn't be that surprising.
Yeah, when you think about it, because they had some interesting characters of people you would never expect.
And spoilers, too. There's usually dragons involved. Dragon Quest.
I'm looking at the cover for the 11th game right now, and I see a dragon.
And that's just kind of like I know it's kind of like, seems like redundant to say this, but that's like, just kind of like part of the point, I guess. It's not like wholly dragon themed, but like dragons are a part of it. Dragons are a thing. Sometimes you'll fight dragons, sometimes like you'll like talk to them, sometimes like you'll find out that there's some sort of god or some sort of spirit that you have no hope of actually, like, interacting with. All you can do is just hope not to piss it off. Or you're the chosen one. And somehow, it's a dragon that has chosen you. Spoilers again for 11. One of the big monumental moments in the gameplay is whenever, like, you're interacting with, like, the spirit of Yggdrasil, which is the tree of life for this realm. Essentially, like, they kind of, like, follow the mentality that all life comes from the tree, and that when life ends, like, your essence returns to the tree to kind of like be recycled into a new life. Well, the tree, the spirit of the tree, Yggdrasil, has always kind of like had a champion, per se. And whenever there's a time of need, it chooses this champion and endows him with the power of the luminary, which basically allows them to channel the power of the spirit of Yggdrasil themselves. On one occasion, when the spirit or energy or whatever of Yggdrasil leaves the tree, which has essentially been its host and home for the last millennia, leaves, and it takes on the form of a golden dragon, which there's also a move that you can do in 11, which I believe it does take all of your party members to pull it off, but it's like the Rage of Yggdrasil or something, and like you channel all your energy into this massive shot. And it's a giant golden dragon that, like, chomps down on the enemy.
I mean, that sounds cool enough for me.
I mean, I thought so. I just like it because, like, there's, like, serious tones, but there's quirky tones sometimes. Like, there's enough to where, like, okay, like there's like some serious shit going on, but like the game is not so serious that you get like down and out by playing it. Or at least I don't.
When I was playing what little bit I did play, I never felt it was overwhelmingly depressing in any way, so...
Nah. Which, I mean, like, any one particular thing could potentially be overwhelmingly depressing if you focus on it enough for long enough. I think any good story, though, has, like, ups and downs to it. Like, if it's nothing but positive stuff, like, eventually that becomes kind of boring. That's only my personal opinion.
I know,
put it out there.
I couldn't take positive all the time, either. It's just like watching a Sunday morning cartoon or something.
Well, I mean, like, you want to try to, like, grow from some negative feedback, which I think is good. You know, it also helps keep you humble. I played that Dragon Quest VIII game, though, like, so many times that I ended up, like, wearing the disc out. And it broke.
Oh, no.
Which, I mean, like, for those that know, that's saying something, man.
PlayStation 2, correct?
Yeah, which, I mean, I also admit I'm guilty of being one of those people that never took the disc out.
I took the disc out, took care of everything. I was looking it up here, and it's available places for the PlayStation if you have a PlayStation 2. I'm sure you can maybe find it somewhere else in some more sketchy way I'm not familiar with. The only one I can find easily enough is the 11th one.
Yeah.
Which is available on every major console and PC.
Well, if you want to play 8, my recommendation is try to hit up like one of your local game stores or game shops and see if they have an old copy sitting on a shelf that hasn't been sold or one that someone's traded in.
I found it Amazon, PlayStation 2 for $59. Well, I mean, that's really the only place I see.
Well, you can follow our affiliate link. If
you really want to pay that much for it, I guess it's fair, $51.99. I'll add the affiliate links for the 8th one, that's $51, and the 11th one, the definitive edition, has extra content in it. I'll add it for all the major consoles, the Switch and the PC. I'll add those affiliate links into the description of this episode. So if you buy anything like that from Amazon, we'll get a small kickback from it, but the price will not change for you. It just helps us out.
Yeah, and we appreciate it, if you manage to do it.
Yeah, I learn a little bit about the game every time you say something about it. It's as new for me.
It's always good to hear, man. Like, I mean, that's part of the reason for this whole podcast too, like to where we're like helping to like not just share our experiences, but also like kind of help educate each other a little bit on stuff that we don't know so much about. Let's hope we can educate ourselves and others at the same time. Hope so. We can all learn together. Let's do that. Positive outlook. As positive as we can get. Okay, I've enjoyed this so far. I as well. We're part of a larger network known as the Gruesome Gaming Group. Yeah, we have a Twitter account and a couple other podcasts we do. The Twitter account is Gruesome Gaming G. If you want to contact us there, you can tweet at us or whatever, give us ideas or tell us what you think, or if we got something wrong, you could let us know. And we'd really like to hear the feedback, guys, so feel free. And leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Some apps let you leave reviews. The other podcast I do is with my sister, and it's called Horrific History and Hauntings. The title says it all. We go over bad things that's happened in history or ghostly things, or usually bad things that lead to a ghostly encounter. Stuff like that. Yeah, if you're a fan of more of the dark and morbid side of history, definitely check it out. I think we need to have Dakota as a guest sometime, if he wants to. I'm down. And that leads us to our other podcast called Brother Knows Quest. It's a podcast where I go down to my sister's, or she comes to me, and I talk about one of the many tabletop role-playing games I got, and try to explain the setting, a few of the rules to her, and see if she would ever want to play it. If you're a little bit more on the nerdy side like us for tabletop RPGs, and want to check out some different game systems out there, you've never really took the time to sit down and either buy the books or check them out yourself, definitely, give a listen to Brother Knows Quest, and you'll listen to Ramie and Beth kind of figure out a lot of what they're doing as far as the rules go for some of these systems. We cover a bit here and there, and Dakota's the one to introduce me to tabletop role-playing games, so we're going to have to specifically D&D 5th edition. I found the rest myself. Yeah, planted the seed and see the force that has grown. We appreciate you listening. I've been Ramie. And this has been Dakota. Logging off.